Hey there, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. And our executive producer, Hawk, is on scene. Yes, a good girl. Yes, a good girl. Shake? Shake? Can we shake? That's a good girl. Down? Can you lay down? You want to lay down, huh? So she's on scene, and she's going to be around for the rest of the program, I think. But in the meantime, this is a missing persons segment, and I thank you for being here. It's really windy outside in Montana. We've had some strange weather, but all's good. And strange weather in Montana, a lot of strange things going on in the world right now, as many of you know. But I appreciate you all being here. Somebody the other day was paying attention to Dave. And I'm big on eagles. Almost every day when I drive anywhere around Montana, I see a bald eagle. And I feel blessed every day. Well, somebody probably picked up on the fact that I talk about this a lot. And they're an important creature in our world. Well, somebody sent me this, and it says on the outside, "Be strong and take heart, all who hope in the Lord." Beautiful, absolutely stunning. And inside is a copy of the Holy Bible. Absolutely awesome. And then they wrote inside, "Dave, the greatest gift that we can give you is God's holy Bible. You're in our thoughts and prayers. Sherry and family, Easter 2023. Wow. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Sherry and family. Sitting on my nightstand. So, there's been some weird cases about missing people in the news just lately. And I like the fact that you guys are paying attention. And I've got a lot of cases that I probably would have never seen before. Specifically around Chicago, there's been a whole lot of cases of young men ending up in water in and around Chicago. And right lately, the Chicago police have been saying, well, there might be a serial killer out there. They said the same thing in the UK in the last 10 years when that's happened, especially in Manchester. They said, oh, there's a serial killer. Nobody ever sees this happen. Nobody ever sees how the people get in the water. But they always end up in the water. And the point I'm trying to make is that if you go out with somebody and they're drinking, stay in pairs. Don't go out alone. But a lot of times these people disappear from the inside of a pub or a beer hall or whatever you might want to call it. Nobody ever sees them leave. So how do they get out of there? I have no idea. It's very odd. That's Missing 411, a sobering coincidence, where I wrote about all these. And I've written about cases, and apparently I don't say this enough, I've written about cases in 16 countries, not just the USA and not just Canada. And remember, the name of our organization is the CanAm Missing Project, Canadian American. Well, that started to expand quickly when I started to realize that there were these cases throughout the world. It's probably far more than 16 countries. It's probably the majority of the countries in the world, but the problem is language barrier and investigative barrier. And a lot of people talk about the cases in South America when they saw Missing 411, the UFO connection. And I agree, there's a lot of weird cases in South America. The obstacle is getting credible investigators and credible reports. That's the only thing. So today, we're going to delve right into some letters that I think are really good. First one. This is Dave. I've been meaning to send you an email for the last couple of months about Missing 411, the UFO connection. You really knocked it out of the park. I've probably watched the movie about 5 to 8 times and always find something new and interesting. Thank you for that. I've watched so many documentaries that are so light on content that after the first 20 minutes I just tell whoever I'm with, I can't watch this anymore. There's so many other things I can do with my life. This doesn't make me think, and it has no valuable content in it. Now, there have been some people on Amazon that have wrote that exact thing about my movie right here, saying, oh, there's nothing new in it, there's no valuable content. Just rip me in it. But I know I put a lot of content in there that's never been talked about. The sheer magnitude of quality content, interesting cases, suspense, and paranormal fringe subject matter is unparalleled. Thank you for making such a great movie. It must have been an immense undertaking, and I can't wait until your next movie comes out. Well, thank you very much. Must have been an immense undertaking. Yes. Immense doesn't even begin to explain that movie. It took me to my knees several times, dollars and cents wise and everything else. It was gigantic undertaking. Emotionally, physically, monetarily, please spread the word. We need people watching that movie. I follow you on YouTube and watch your shows on a regular basis. I'm excited to say the least about your new UFO class. Great content so far. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Now, I've done a Bigfoot class. We did 20 Bigfoot classes. And we've got a final that's coming up in the next week. And so we're doing this UFO as the next class. I've already had some people say it's horrible, so. And then somebody else said, Dave, you should never have said anything in the Bible or anything related to religion is related to UFOs. Sorry. I also wanted to say thank you for inspiring me to become a field investigator with MUFON. Excellent. I went through the boot camp in Arizona last year and I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. I went from field investigator to my current position as CAGFI. Each case is incredibly fascinating and I can't believe the increasing amount of activity being reported. I'm so thankful to have a seat at the table in this conversation moving forward. I'm glad, really glad you did that. MUFON always needs more quality investigators, really. I'm still living in Missoula and I'm currently looking for houses in Missoula, Kalispell, and Whitefish. Apparently the prices have come down somewhat from what others have told me, not from what I can tell. No matter where I purchase a house, I think there's currently only like 2 investigators in the state of Montana. If you ever need assistance investigating a case, holding a camera, or just an extra hand, keep me in mind. I'm your guy. Regardless, I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for all that you've done and continue to do. You're doing God's work, my brother. Wow. Thank you. From a fellow Montanan. This is great. Next letter. I really enjoy your presentations on YouTube, especially the Missing 411 segments. Your programs have been really great to listen to whilst I've been recovering from sepsis and hand surgery since Christmas. I like to listen to you whilst I walk my dog George in the woodland behind our house and get my fitness back up. My story was related to me by my grandfather whilst I was a teenager. He and I used to talk a lot about childhood and Army service as a medic in World War II. After the war, he returned home to Somerset in England to drive a 5-ton lorry for an egg packing firm. This involved him driving out to farms in rural Somerset and Dorset to collect eggs for a central depot. One day he called in to see an elderly farmer who lived on his own on a hilltop farm near the town of Bruton. This would have been in late 50s, early 60s. The farmer told my grandfather a story about how he came out of his house one night and saw an object moving around on the hill on which his farm was located. The object was dark and he could see it was a disc or oval shape with a series of lights running around the middle that flashed in multi-bright colors. The object appeared to fly slowly around the hill a few times at a leisurely pace before disappearing into a nearby valley. This is the farmer told my grandfather that the sighting was 30 years before and then in the 1930s. Given the most advanced aircraft around the mid-30s in the UK, it was probably a Hawker furry biplane fighter. It's hard to fathom what it was. My grandfather thought it might have been an airship, as he himself saw the R-100, R-101 airship in the air as a boy. My grandfather was a practical man, having seen service in Italy and North Africa. He remembers being terrified by the Salerno landings, but he always had an open mind, and later on he joined films such as Close Encounters and Star Wars. I always enjoyed his stories, and I miss him now. He's no longer around. I hope this little story is of interest. I want to thank you for all the great work you've done and your honesty when talking about mental health. It's really been inspiring during a difficult time. Well, thanks for that story. The reality is that many people don't understand that when I first started talking about Bigfoot, everyone thought, oh, it must have just started in 1967 at Bluff Creek, and there must only be one Bigfoot in the whole world. A lot of people think that. Same people think the same thing about UFOs, and that's odd because UFOs have been around for centuries and centuries. And to think that people couldn't have seen one back in the early 1900s is ridiculous. Thanks for that story. Next one. Hey Dave, my name is blank, and I've been following your work since I stumbled across a talk you gave that was featured on MUFON's YouTube channel years ago. First off, I want to give you my deepest condolences on the loss of your son, Ben. Ben. Think about that kid every day. And there's a lot of weird things that go on in my life, and there's a psychic, I'll just say it, in right near where I live. I see her occasionally. She's a really nice lady. And she said things to me that there's no way she would have known what she said was so true. And she couldn't have plucked it out of the air. And it was about Ben. And she said things to Angie too about Ben. There's no way she would have known. So, and one of the things she told me, she said, Dave, Ben's looking over your shoulder all the time. All the time. And she says it's a good thing. Okay. I hope so. I light candles in memory of loved ones who have moved on, and Ben's candle sits between my grandfather's and an old friend's. Well, thank you for that. They live on in our hearts and guide us when we are troubled. The Missing 411 movies are excellent, to say the least, and I show them to as many of my friends as possible. I'm also sure to have your channel playing at my tattoo studio, so all my clients get to hear your talks as well. Yes, thank you. Many of my clients live in rural areas and have told me interesting stories from unexplained phenomena. I wanted to relate to you two instances, one of which happened to me and one of which happened to my husband. The first one was in the year 2000 in late August during dusk. I was 17 years old, hanging out with 5 friends in a ball field which overlooked a small patch of pine forest, interspersed with some large boulders and rocky cliffs, here in St. Stephen, New Brunswick. Beautiful place. Just on the border of Maine. We were stargazing, talking about the upcoming school year, when one of my friends pointed out a light in the sky. She insisted it wasn't a star, that it was moving. Once we were all able to focus in on the light, it appeared about the size and brightness of the other stars in the sky, but it was wobbling through the sky. It became brighter and larger until we noted that it was casting light on the forest below, probably a few hundred yards from us. The light would disappear, then instantly reappear in a different location, still wobbling and hovering over the forest. It was when it started to glide toward us over the field that we felt a sudden sense of dread and urgency to vacate the area. We ran away as fast as we could back to our friend's house a few blocks away, never stopping and never looking back. I gotta say something. Really? Now, I want you to think about this. This is a good story so far. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done anything different, but think about this analytically. If that thing in the sky was so advanced that it could hover there and you can't hear it, you could probably do a lot of things, and it doesn't matter if you could run really fast and you got into a little house. I doubt that's going to stop that thing. Just saying. It's a small town here, and most of us still live in the area, and we all remember it clearly. Some of us have been vocal about it. Others have chosen to stay quiet for fear of derision, I suppose, but I have no qualms about telling you. The second incident happened to my husband a few years later in 2005 in September. Though I don't recall the exact date, I'll tell his story as it was related to me. He had just passed his hunter safety certification and was excited to get out into the family woods in New Brunswick and hunt some rabbit. He had set snares the day before, and I'd packed him a lunch and some water, and off he went on foot with his .22 and a large hunting knife. When he returned 4 hours later, he was shaken, pale, sweaty, dirty, and frightened. Oh, that's not good. Shaken, pale, sweaty, dirty, and frightened. I wouldn't want to draw that set of cards. He told me that he was walking about an hour deep in the woods following some deer trails. He got the feeling he was being observed. He couldn't say anything now. He couldn't see anything, but now and then he could hear what sounded like someone whistling to get his attention. He would continue along the path a few moments and would hear the whistle again. He felt as though whatever was whistling was very close. But the forest being so dense and it being early fall, there were still lots of foliage in the trees. There have been mountain lions sighted here. That was our first thought, but mountain lions don't whistle. A breeze came up and he was all of a sudden aware of a pungent, sticky aroma. He described it as roadkill mixed with a porta potty. Eeh. Doesn't smell good, doesn't sound good. The whistling continued, and he decided it was best to check his snares and get out of the woods as fast as he could. He caught 2 rabbits and was tying them to his pack when he became aware of a hulking figure watching him from a tree line 50 feet away. He said it looked like a man in a ghillie suit, and he paused as they looked at each other. He waved, at which point the figure let out another sharp whistle and quickly started moving through the tree line as if to come across his path on the trail. My husband said it made no sound as it moved through the thick brush. Okay, stop right there. I don't care what you are. You should make a sound coming through the brush. Unless you weren't stepping on the brush. I've said this before many times because I've heard the same thing hundreds of times. Yeah, we saw it moving, but it wasn't making sounds. And it had to have because there's a lot of brush there. He decided that was enough. It was time for him to go. He cut a wide circle around where he had last seen and smelled the figure and walked straight southeast, which he knew would bring him to the highway that ran along the length of his family's property. He hit the highway and walked home from there, feeling a bit safer with the sounds of the passing cars, but not too safe, as every now and then, when the wind would allow, he could smell that smell, though he heard no more whistling after his retreat from the woods. I have many more accounts I could relate to you, but those will do for now. Thank you for so much reading and for everything you do. I'm honored to be a part of the village that you've created for us and will continue to spread the good word. Take care, Dave. So if you're the person that wrote that, send me an email at CanAm, like Canadian American, CanAmMissing at yahoo.com. And I want to know if your husband can describe the face of the biped that he saw and what time he saw it. Those are important points to me. Did he ever go back to the location and stand at the location where he saw this biped and determine how tall it was? And have there been other sightings in the area? I'd like to know. Anytime a hunter sees something like this, I pay close attention because hunters are pretty much aware people when they're in the woods. You have to be. So I am interested in that. Next story. Hey Dave, I just want to wish Mr. Paulides ongoing success in his efforts. I enjoy listening to all of his videos, even though I often strongly disagree with his conclusions. I was just listening to the first part of the UFO series where he discusses his only encounter and described a series of lights performing unexplained maneuvers. I'd like to offer a possible explanation. I've known many people who have seen such light phenomena, though I've never seen them myself. Tectonic activity is known to cause such lights. This is the famous spook light of Brown Mountain, North Carolina, and one near my town of Blenheim Light. There are lights in Iceland, another famous area for geothermal activity, which have been videotaped and reliably occur at regular intervals. They zigzag all over the sky and could easily be mistaken for being under intelligent control. It is a purely natural event, though, and none the less wondrous for having a natural explanation. I know Mr. Paulides is a religious man and will appreciate the wonders of nature to attest to a divine architect, such as surely any of the supposed extraterrestrial spaceships. I suspect the missing 411 mystery has a natural explanation. Well, then why are you here? If you can so easily write off my observation and the 1,500 cases I've written about, but I'm sure you haven't read one book because it's all so easily explained. Yeah, there's no mystery here. And you probably didn't pay close attention to what I said when myself and 3 other vet students, way smarter than me, all observed it. And the lights weren't anywhere near the ground. They were far up in the sky, thousands of feet. And they would all go to each corner of the sky, and then they'd all come together and clump up. And then they'd move in a circle, and then they'd go out, and it's like they were doing a dance. No, this was not any tectonic activity. It was no geothermal activity. It was nothing, as this man said. Good try, though. When you try to minimize someone's observation, it's because you are probably not comfortable with the reality of what they're describing. And so it's easier just to poo-poo anybody than to respect what they have to say and think that maybe what they saw was something truly unusual. Now, as I stated before, Angie and I have pretty advanced night vision observation scope, and we've seen things in the night sky that were traveling at or above the level of satellites, but they weren't satellites because they didn't move in a straight line. Satellites always move at a very, very consistent pace. You know, you're not watching a satellite when they start making left and right turns, stopping, coming together with another object. We've seen all this kind of stuff on multiple times looking at the night sky. But this person would probably say, oh, you know, it's just space voodoo and, you know, solar flares and whatever. I don't even know why they're here. Now, this next story actually came from a friend of mine. And he's a very credible guy. He said, Dave, your UFO class is fantastic. Watching the class generated some thoughts in me. I thought you might find it interesting. I was stationed at Minot Air Force Base for 5.5 winters. Not years, winters, laughing out loud. That's how people describe it. While North Dakota surprisingly reaches a dry heat temp of over 100 degrees each year for a day or two, the winters deliver temps as low as negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill of negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit ambient. That's pretty cold, and that leads to an external question of why not Minot? And the answer, freezing's the reason. I came up with ice is nice and cold is bold. During my time there, I served as a launch control facility, LCF. Oscar is the closest LCF, about 30 minutes away. Some of the furthest LCFs were an hour and a half away. There were 15 LCF spaced out into a kind of rough horseshoe placement around Minot, and each LCF controlled about 10 ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, silos around it. Each LCF has security forces garrisoned there to respond to alarms. At the time, they were called ART and SART teams, if memory serves me, armed response teams, usually in an armored car, and special alarm response teams. They were geared up for war with M60 machine guns and grenade launchers. Responding to an alarm was a no-kidding kind of endeavor. My military service has one of the strangest career arcs ever. I began as a cook, a chef, cross-trained into visual information, which required me to get a top-secret security clearance, which ultimately led into special operations where I retired. But at LCF Oscar, I was the missile chef. And this was neat because it was a one-chef operation. I would cook all the meals on a 3.5-day rotation. Anyway, the neat thing about being the chef was that I got to cook the food for the missile crew, the missileers, who were in the capsule buried in the ground. I would personally bring their food down to them. Now that would be cool, the first 10 times. I'd love to see the inside of an old missile silo now. Actually, a friend of mine owns one in Washington. I've never been to it though. So after making the food, I would go to the FSC, Flight Security Controller office, where the elevator was secured, and take it down 3 or 4 floors into the ground. It was like a movie elevator with a sliding cage door, not the typical kind of elevator. You could see the concrete wall slowly moving as you went down, and then once down, it was like being on the set of an alien movie. Dark, hissing steam, shadows, rugged-looking technology, etc. And then there was a capsule door down the creepy hallway, like a round vault door with a wheel knob, like on a ship to unlock and lock it. The capsule crew, always consisting of 2 officers in blue flight suits, would spin the wheel to open the door, and then I'd hand them the trays of the food. During the first 3.5-day tour, the crew gave me a tour of the capsule, even running a simulated nuclear drill for me alone. Oh, man. That would be cool. Lights were flashing, sirens were blaring, and they went through the steps of activating nuclear ICBMs for launch as a simulation only, not in reality, of course. I worked at LCF Oscar for about 6 months, and it was an experience. And I heard about some of the paranormal goings-on from the security forces stationed there. They told me about seeing UFOs at night in the distance. The FSC recounted how they saw UFOs in the distance. Well, the guy earlier? No, they didn't see that. They didn't. Don't believe that. The FCSC recounted how he was in the main security office alone at night, and he had set an ink pen down on his desk. A while later, he went down to write a report, and it wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. He looked all over for his pen and couldn't find it. Then later, it was right where he left it. No one else had been in the office during that night shift. There were also talls, T-A-L-L-S, about a nearby town called Taegus, T-A-E-G-U-S, not sure if I spelled it right, that had a church with blacked out windows and was supposedly a satanic church. Also, someone had tossed a decapitated goat head over the barbed wire fence at several ICBM silos to be discovered by the SART teams responding to alarms. After reading Hunt for Skinwalker many years ago and thinking about the accounts that they had relayed to me during my time at LCF Oscar, the occurrences seemed similar to Skinwalker Ranch information. Cryptids, Bigfoot sightings at the main base at Minot Air Force Base, UFOs at the silos at Minot Air Force Base, objects vanishing then reappearing, and then this was years before Skinwalker info even came out. I was at Minot from 92 to 97. Wow, must have been interesting times. Sorry for the lengthy email, but I wanted to give you and possibly the audience a taste of what it was like to work at a launch control facility and to go down into the depths of the capsule. And I thought that the comparison to the strange events at Minot might be useful. Somehow, in thinking about the UFO, Bigfoot, Skinwalker Ranch topics, this is a strange and amazing world we live in, and it is far different than what we've been told. Thanks, Dave. It's late. Please keep up the good work, and as always, you and your family are in my prayers. I'm planning on attending the Kentucky MUFON conference. Well, hope to see you at the MUFON conference in Kentucky too. And don't forget, in just a couple weeks, in April, I'll be at the Ocala Bigfoot conference in Florida. Just Google Ocala Bigfoot conference and you can find it. Next letter. Hey Dave, the story of Kathy Osgard from your Wednesday show is a complete example of the phenomena that continues. Miraculously, she was found. The story of the toddler that disappeared out of the man's truck during the winter didn't end well, for the toddler was found dead. What was also very heartbreaking was how the father tried hard to figure out how the toddler was able to unbuckle from the baby seat, open the door, exit the truck, and wander off. It was in Utah. And if I'm not mistaken, it drove him to the point of taking his own life. It's true, I did a video about this. Of course, the story is from an earlier show of yours, and I got some wrong and I missed it. I apologize. This is so interesting, is that Kathy, nor any others, was not violated. She was found naked, completely unharmed. Same with males. The only thing I can think of is that it's a Sasquatch doing this. It's to bring those little ones to their offspring and to be played with for some time. The removal of the clothing could be due to curiosity, perhaps even the smell, aroma, the scent of a 16-month-old toddler. I'm sure this pleasant scent is still present at a year and 4 months. Furthermore, Kathy was found clean. Interesting. Now, David, I'm at the point that if I showed up to join a search and rescue team to find someone who disappeared, once it became obvious that the dogs could not pick up a scent, I'd want to alert everyone that the disappearance most likely falls into the category of missing 411 and lay out specific data. I would wonder if others on the team would be familiar with it. I doubt it. You know, a lot of people think, well, everyone in the world must know about missing 411. Truth is, very few people know about it. It's one of the best kept secrets probably in the paranormal space. Would it be a good idea to lay this out on a specific profile before the search even began? Nope. For example, I show the location of the disappeared, and before everyone sets off to search, I briefly explain this phenomena, mentioning that the dogs teams do have the scent of the person from clothing and shoes, but that it becomes obvious that the dogs can't pick up the scent to track, then this falls in the particular phenomena. Do you think at this point this will happen, that enough search and rescue people will learn of this and that it will become part of the procedure? Just briefly mentioning the possibility of falling in the specific profile, particularly where dogs can't pick up the scent. It's not easy writing this, and I hope it wasn't long. I know that I'm wanting to communicate, but sometimes it's not easy putting it into writing. On an earlier show of yours, I took this screenshot of profile points that I've given to a few people. I encourage them to watch your show, even though I know one of them won't. Hee hee. What I do after watching your show is pass this info on to them, telling them about it. I guess it keeps them from having to do it. Couple things. I've given a talk to the largest search and rescue organization in the world. It's called NASAR, N-A-S-A-R. And one of their board members had read a few of my books and saw the value in them. There had to have been over 1,000 people. And 99% of the people were super nice, super interested, and engaged. And a couple of women, right in the middle of my presentation, said, "What are you doing here?" And this is right in the midst of a huge audience. "What are you doing here? You know, you're a big Bigfoot researcher, and all you want to say is Bigfoot is doing this." And it was super demeaning, insulting. I never said any of those things. I just let them spout off. They eventually stopped and sat down. I never brought Bigfoot up. As you know, I just don't. But then at the end of this is about 10 years ago, at the end of the presentation, I asked if there's any questions. And at the way back of the room, two of these big hulking guys stand up. And they're Alaska State Troopers. And they said, Mr. Paulides, we've been coming to these meetings for a long time. Nobody ever wants to talk about what you just brought up. But we run into it all the time in Alaska. Thanks for talking about things that people are uncomfortable with, because it happens. They sat down. And I thought, whoa. They kind of shut down those women. But here's an interesting part. I never made any recommendations about guidelines with search and rescue need to be changed. I never said that they're doing anything wrong. I just laid out facts. But people are uncomfortable with facts, especially if it flies in the face of something they've done for maybe their entire career. And you know, I've never been back to Nassar. They've never invited me back. They don't want to hear about this. Even though I just lay out facts. Facts about how far kids have been found from a point last seen. How high kids can climb, way outside the boundaries of what they claim. It's very frustrating. And there's some great people in Nassar, but the people that should know about what we're talking about today will never know, because NASA's going to insulate them from this. Just the way some people are. So today, I'm going to talk to you about two cases, and they're both fascinating. Very fascinating. And the first case is something I don't talk about that often. And what I mean by that is missing planes. People want to just write those off. Yet, on the Unexplained show with William Shatner that I've been on a couple times, they interviewed a pilot from Florida that was flying out over the islands in the Bahamas or somewhere out there. And he flew into like a vortex, a spinning cloud. And he said as he was flying through the middle of it, the clouds were going in circles around him. And he came out the other side and he lost a major amount of time. It's almost like a vortex or something. There's a lot of strange things that happen in the sky. And this is the case I want to talk about because it's in Michigan. Now, a couple named John and Jean Black. John was a fire chief at the Chrysler plant in Detroit. Jean, his wife. Jean was 55, John was 56. He had been a pilot for 23 years, and he and his wife lived in Warren, Michigan. And they were flying a green and white Cessna 150J. This is the exact plane they were flying. And the number on it was Nora 50935, a 150J. Now, a 150, I've actually flown a 150. When I was young, my dad had a plane and he put me into pilot's training. So I flew a 150, and it's two-seater, nice plane. Doesn't carry much luggage, doesn't carry much weight, just two people and a small amount of luggage. Well, this plane was in the process of being converted to a search and rescue plane, which is a little odd. This happened July 4th, 1977. And they left Warren County Airport, where they normally left from, at 11:10 a.m. And that airport's kind of in the northeast section of Detroit. At 11:10 when they left, they were going to head north on a route that John and Jean had flown 2 times before. They were going to fly up to northern Michigan and see relatives up there that they had planned on visiting. And again, they've done this trip before. And they were en route to a place called the Lost Creek Sky Ranch Airport in Mayo, Michigan. So here's what happened. They departed their airport here, and then they ended up at 1 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry, at 11:45 a.m. 45 minutes after they took off, they landed at a place called Beach Airport in Charlotte, west of Lansing. And they landed, and they thought they were getting close to where they should be. Well, the airport was closed, but there were some other pilots there, and they talked to them. They figured out where they were, and they took off again, headed north where they should have been going in the first place. But they were 60 miles off course. That was at 11:45. At 1 p.m., John calls the Sky Ranch Airport. It says, "We'll be arriving in 15 minutes. We need a car there, please." 15 minutes, he doesn't arrive. 30 minutes, he doesn't arrive. An hour later, he doesn't arrive. They try to call him on the radio. There's nothing. They call Civil Air Patrol, and they file a missing persons report. Now, John and Jean's son was a detective with the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office in Michigan, and he assisted in the overall search. And he explained that his dad was a fastidious flyer for 23 years. In the Cessna he was flying, didn't have any advanced instruments, and that his dad always followed highways wherever he went, under a VFR, visual flight rule. There's IFR, instrument flight rule, and VFR, visual type story. So when I was going through training, when they teach you to fly IFR, instrument flight rule, you have to find a way to pretend that there's fog or there's clouds all around you and you can't see, and you have to look at your instruments. So they put this kind of like a strange looking hat over the top of you, so you have to look at the instrument panel. I did that for like 15 minutes and I was ready to puke. Just something didn't work out well. Working under the hood, it wasn't my cup of tea. So anyhow, with the blocks, everyone knew they flew this route before. Fastidious flyer, knew the roadways. Well, the Civil Air Patrol took off, and they started following the route from where John and Jean were last seen in Charlotte to where they were going up in the northern parts of Michigan. And they flew this route. Now the route, from point to point, straight line, 170 miles, shouldn't take more than an hour and a half, max, which is about the time that he called up there. And no large bodies of water in that area, just a lot of woods. So everybody thought they must have went down somewhere in that area. So the Civil Air Patrol notified every county sheriff in the area. They searched their areas. Now, west of that location is where a Northwest Orient airliner went down and was never found. Also where a Civil Air Patrol plane looking for the airliner disappeared as well. And I did a video about this. You can find it. Now, just north of where this happened is where the jet, U.S. Air Force jet, disappeared chasing a UFO. And just west is where several missing people have disappeared on islands out there. This region of Michigan has a lot of missing people. Now you have to think about this analytically. Please do. 46 years ago, this happened. Do you know how many thousands of hunters comb the ground in Michigan every year? Thousands. And to think that after 46 years, this plane hasn't been found makes no sense at all. None. But it's been that way with a lot of planes. And that's why I say there's something more going on. And that's why I wrote about it, Missing 411 Law, Land, Air, and Water. And I wrote about a lot of planes that disappeared in that strange area of Alaska. Alaska has a lot of airplanes, a lot of pilots. That's a hard place to get around on the ground. Now the weather is erratic, but most of the pilots up there are really good. A lot of strange cases. Now the reason I told you this case is because it happened in one of those areas that has a lot of planes that are missing. Now, Hawk's asleep, snoring, just laying on the ground right next to me. So if they were flying over water, it could be more easily discounted. Over land, I can't discount it because I can't rationally understand what happened. That's a John and Jean Black, 55 and 56, disappeared July 4th, 1977. There never was a call of distress, never a radio call saying, hey, engine trouble, running out of gas, whatever. Nothing. Nobody on the ground ever reported seeing a plane coming out of the air. Key point. So, I don't talk a lot about airplanes. Now the next case, a little more up your alley and mine. Dr. Walter Lawton, 64 years old. Borderline genius. So he went missing June 7th, 1971 at 5:30 p.m. He was a retired Temple University math professor. He lived with his wife in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania. 5'2", 120 pounds. This occurred in 71. In 1969, Walter contracted encephalitis, sleeping sickness. And during his diagnosis and multiple meetings with a physician, they also diagnosed him as having Parkinson's disease. And the Parkinson's forced his early retirement from 32 years at the math department. He was described as a brilliant thinker. Remember that. Well, Walter was just not only brilliant, but in World War II, he was one of the earliest radar operators the United States ever had. He was trained in math at Harvard and MIT, where only the smartest mathematicians come out of. So you know that he knew his stuff. Walter was one of these people that wouldn't let the Parkinson's slow him down, so he would always go out and take a long walk every night. And on June 7th, he did his normal, everyday, standard walk. Always left at about 3 p.m. and would always be back in time for Gunsmoke, per his wife. She reported him missing at 6:40 p.m. This is after she went down the roads and the avenues and the trails that he would normally be at, thinking she was just going to find him sitting there, tired and maybe twisted an ankle or something, but didn't find anything. She described him as being in good spirits, nothing unusual, just an everyday normal walk. Well, the sheriff called for search and rescue, and they concentrated on an area at the Mountaintop Road in Whitehaven. Now, where's Whitehaven? Well, down here is Philadelphia. Whitehaven's up here. Still today, Whitehaven is pretty rural. You get outside the city limits and gets rural quickly. It's kind of just west of Pocono and just south of Wilkes-Barre and just north of Allentown. So search and rescue shows up, sheriff shows up, and they call for canine units from different cities. They were looking in an area called Camp Kresge and around an area called Lake Francis. Now, Tobyhanna Army Depot sent Army Reserve soldiers and some on-duty Army soldiers. Pennsylvania State Police sent a contingent. Wilkes-Barre Police sent 2 canine units. The canine units were some of the first on the scene, and they trailed the scent from the house half mile down to this dead end of the road where he takes off on the trail. And they all tracked to the end of that dead end, and it all stopped each time. And that didn't make any sense to anybody, because it was on a road that was rarely, if ever, traveled. If it was traveled, then Mrs. Lawton would have heard the car coming down the street. There was no car that came down the street. Nothing made sense. But there was a 3-day massive search. And they ran out of areas to search. And search and rescue got frustrated. Now, I've said this before about Pennsylvania. Some of the most unusual stuff I've ever heard of comes from that state. And if you've been following our UFO class, if you've been following our Bigfoot class, then there's this overlap of Bigfoot and UFO sightings in Pennsylvania. It's been 52 years since this incident happened. And the same as in the Blocks case, thousands of hunters have crisscrossed this area where Dr. Lawton disappeared. His belt buckle, his belt, his shoes, the elastic strap on his underwear. All of this essentially lasts forever. How did somebody not see these remains? Now, Pennsylvania has 90% more clusters than almost all the other states. There's more kids missing from Pennsylvania from 1935 to 1950 than almost anywhere in the United States. How is that? That's something I've never been able to reconcile in my mind. And there's as many UFO and cryptid sightings in Pennsylvania as any other state you can think of. Now, does that play into this? Well, there's certain things about Dr. Lawton that fit very nicely into my profiles. Namely, Dr. Lawton, highly intellectual. Highly. How many times have I told you of disappearances of people in their 60s and 70s and we never find a clue as to where they are? Folks, that doesn't make sense and it doesn't follow protocol. Why are these older people vanishing? Why? Now, highly intellectual. That's a subcategory in and of itself of the missing people. He had a disability. He had Parkinson's disease. And he had encephalitis. So, could that have been part of this, to understand how this interacts with his system? I don't know. They send 2 canine units out, and they lose track of the scent almost immediately. This is in a cluster of missing people. And you have point of separation. He leaves his wife at their house, walks a half mile down the road, and vanishes. At least according to the canines, he does. So how can that be? Math people. I talked about a math professor from the University of Oregon, an Asian man who disappeared in the wilderness and was never found. I've talked about multiple physicians who have disappeared and have been found and haven't been found under the most unexplained conditions imaginable. I've talked about a whole handful of physicists, all German, who have disappeared and have never been found. I could keep going down this line if I went into other countries and spent the time that would be needed there to research various cases, and I'm sure I'd find them. There's something to this. Because on that other end of the scale, you don't hear, and I'm just going to use this as an example, when I talked about earlier in the show where a series of young men who have disappeared and been found in water, young men, bright, healthy, educated, who have disappeared from bars, drinking establishments, and later been found in the river. Folks, we're not finding winos, drunks, and criminals in the river. Why not? As many people who have overdosed from fentanyl, how come those aren't being found in the river? Think about that. Yet it's healthy, predominantly white males. Think about it. Now, you can follow me at Twitter. I post sometimes 2 times daily there. David Paulides at CanAm Missing. You can buy my books on our website. And our online store is NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Don't buy the books at eBay and Amazon. You'll pay 2 or 3 times what I charge on my site because we don't sell them on Amazon. My movie right here. You can buy the DVD and Blu-ray from me. You can buy the poster from me. I appreciate you being here. I'm very indebted to my villagers and friends who continue to help us out. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up. Write a comment or 2. And lastly, I always ask villagers, and even people that are just passing through, make sure you're subscribed. You'd be surprised how many people get unsubscribed every week off my channel. But the other thing, we need to be all good people. And I don't care what kind of person is in distress, we need to help those people. Whether it's elderly, somebody with a disability who's compromised, you help them. You see somebody on the side of the road who looks like they need help, try to help them. But if you're in the store, hold doors open, help people with large packages that need the help. I think if there was more goodwill in our world, things would be a lot different. So in the meantime, Huck would say goodnight, but she's asleep. I told you she was asleep. Anyhow, you have a great night. Paulides and Huck out.